Karen poisoned my lawn. She didn't know it was a city landmark. Part 1, Chapter 1, My Piece of Green. My name's Marcus Bell, and I've lived on Cottonwood Street for 12 years now. It's not Beverly Hills, and it's not some crumbling block either. It's the kind of place where kids skateboard on the sidewalks, old couples sip sweet tea on the porch, and people mostly mind their own business, except when they're offering to lend you a lawnmower or a cup of sugar. I love it here, especially my lawn. It's not just any patch of grass. 4 years ago, our city launched a green renewal project, a program to replace traditional lawns with drought-resistant, eco-friendly, pollinator-supporting green spaces. They picked only 20 homes across the city as pilot sites funded with grants and maintained jointly by the homeowners and city contractors, and mine was one of them. Instead of plain grass, my yard had wild native clover, creeping thyme milkweed for the monarchs, and little pathways lined with smooth river stones. In the spring, it exploded into a patchwork quilt of purples, yellows, and soft blues. It wasn't typical. It wasn't golf course perfect. It was alive, and it was a symbol of something bigger, change, hope, future. But to Karen Whitmore, it was just an eyesore. Chapter 2, The Arrival of Karen. I first saw her moving in on a blindingly hot July afternoon. White SUV gleaming in the sun, moving trucks blocking half the street, and Karen sharp polished in a perfectly pressed sundress, barking orders at the poor college kids trying to haul her furniture inside. She surveyed the street like a queen inspecting a half-built castle. And when her gaze landed on my lawn, I caught it. That twitch, that little flicker of judgment. It only took a few days for the comments to start. I was out weeding near the sidewalk when she sauntered over oversized sunglasses perched on her nose. "You know," she said, smiling thinly, "it's interesting how you've let your yard go natural." "It's not natural," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "It's certified green infrastructure, city-supported." Her eyebrows shot up. "Really looks more like neglect." I smiled tightly and went back to my work. But I knew then Karen Whitmore wasn't just any neighbor. She was the kind who needed control, who saw difference as disorder, and she had just decided that I was a problem. Chapter 3, Microaggressions. It didn't stop at that one conversation. Over the next few weeks, Karen found 100 little ways to express her displeasure, accidentally blowing her lawn clippings onto my wildflowers, gossiping loudly on the sidewalk about certain people lowering property values, submitting anonymous complaints to the HOA even though my lawn had full legal protection. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to Mrs. Peterson across the street. "It's just not the image we want for Cottonwood Street, you know. Looks messy, uncivilized." Uncivilized. The word hit me harder than I cared to admit. It wasn't just about plants. It was about who she thought belonged here and who didn't. But I kept my head down, kept pulling weeds, kept tending my green patch like it was a little act of resistance. I figured eventually she'd get tired and move on. I was wrong. Chapter 4, The Night of Poison. It was a Thursday. I'd worked a long shift at the library. Archives came home just before sunset and noticed something strange. A chemical smell, sharp, bitter, unnatural, hanging heavy in the warm evening air. At first I thought maybe someone had sprayed for bugs, but when I stepped onto the lawn I knew the clover leaves were curling inward, the milkweed stems sagging, the thyme turning gray at the edges. Something was killing my lawn. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears, not just because of the damage, but because I knew in my gut who had done it. Still, I needed proof. I checked the small security camera I'd installed above my front door. A gift from my sister after a package theft last year, fast-forwarded through the day. And there she was, 9:36 p.m., Karen Whitmore, in a wide-brimmed hat and oversized hoodie, like some cartoon villain, creeping across my yard with a big orange spray bottle in hand, stopping every few steps to douse the plants. Systematically, methodically, cold-blooded, I sat there in the dark, staring at the footage, my hands trembling. It wasn't just vandalism. It wasn't just pettiness. It was a declaration. Chapter 5, Choosing How to Fight. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the video, kept pacing the living room, kept asking myself, should I call the police? Should I confront her directly? Should I post the footage online? By dawn, the answer was clear. This wasn't just between me and Karen anymore. This was bigger. This was about every community trying to build something better, greener, more inclusive, and facing ignorance armed with poison. So I made a few calls to the City Green Infrastructure Office, to the Environmental Committee, to my friend Eva who worked for the local paper. And then with a deep breath, I uploaded the footage to the neighborhood app. No screaming, no accusations, just the raw clip and a caption. This isn't about grass, it's about respect, about the future. We're trying to grow and the people willing to destroy it. Decide for yourselves. I hit post and waited. The storm was coming, and this time it wasn't going to pass quietly. Part 2. Chapter 6. Viral Firestorm. By noon the next day, the neighborhood app had exploded. Hundreds of comments, dozens of shares. The clip spread like wildfire, not just on our street, not just in our zip code, but across the city. Someone even posted it to Reddit under entitled Neighbor Poisons, City-approved eco-lawn caught on camera. The caption read, "She thought it was just weeds. Turns out it was a $50,000 city-funded environmental pilot." The internet didn't just get mad, it got furious. Environmental groups reposted it calling for action. City activists flooded the mayor's Twitter account demanding justice. Local news stations called my cell nonstop. Karen's smug, pinched face, caught clearly in the footage, became a meme. Say no to Karen's chemical crusade. I watched in awe and horror as it all unfolded. It was out of my hands now. Karen had picked the wrong target, and the world wasn't going to let her get away with it. Chapter 7. Karen strikes back badly. At first, Karen tried to deny it. She posted a rambling manifesto on the neighborhood app. I was merely attempting to address a growing health hazard. Those so-called plants were attracting bees and bugs, dangerous to our children. I acted out of community concern. It was a terrible idea. Within minutes, environmental scientists jumped in. Bees are essential pollinators, not threats. Your lawn is chemically treated, not this native space. You violated multiple city ordinances. Neighbors who had been neutral before now openly condemned her. One comment from Mrs. Peterson, her former ally, went viral. It's not just the plants she tried to kill. It's the spirit of our street. Karen deleted her post, but screenshots lived forever. Chapter 8. Official Action. 3 days after the video went viral, two things happened. City inspectors arrived at my house. They took soil samples, photographs, and formal statements. They shook their heads in disgust at the damage. Karen received an official summons, violation of city environmental codes, destruction of protected green space fines, pending estimated between $25,000 and $50,000. That night, her pristine white BMW was egged. Not by me, not by anyone I knew. But somehow I wasn't surprised. The street wasn't angry anymore. It was betrayed. Karen had broken an unspoken covenant, the one that says, we live here together. We respect each other's dreams, and betrayal always carries a price. Chapter 9. The Public Meltdown. Karen didn't go quietly. She called a press conference right there on her driveway. Local news cameras rolled as she stood behind a collapsible podium, flanked by two people who looked suspiciously like cousins, pretending to be legal advisors. She wore a stark black dress and huge sunglasses. The speech was a disaster. She blamed overzealous environmentalists, the city's poor communication, a coordinated harassment campaign led by certain residents. When a reporter asked, "Do you regret poisoning a city landmark?" Karen snapped on live TV. She screamed, "It was a stupid weed patch. I did what everyone else was too scared to do." Silence, just the soft click of camera shutters. Within hours, the footage made national news. Karen Whitmore, the woman who poisoned the city's future, the face of toxic entitlement. Chapter 10. Crumbling Foundations. After the meltdown, Karen's world collapsed fast. Her property was cited for multiple violations unrelated to the poisoning. Her HOA launched an investigation into her past conduct. Her real estate license, turns out she was a part-time agent, was suspended pending review. Worse, her social circle evaporated overnight. The women she used to lunch with at the country club stopped returning her calls. Her invitations disappeared. Her friends blocked her on Facebook and Instagram. She tried suing the city for emotional distress. The judge laughed her out of court. Meanwhile, my lawn, though damaged, became a symbol. A new wave of volunteers showed up to help replanting milkweed. Restoring the clover. Installing new signage. City landmark protected native habitat. Every morning I walked out to a street buzzing with life. Butterflies returning. Bees weaving between wildflowers. Children chasing each other down sidewalks shouting with laughter. And Karen. She pulled her blinds tighter, parked her SUV further down the block. Shrank powerless, forgotten, a ghost of her former self. Part 3. Chapter 11. The Sound of Silence. After her public meltdown, Karen vanished from sight. She stopped hosting brunches, stopped gardening, stopped making snide comments from her porch. For a while, I barely saw her at all, just the occasional glimpse of her SUV slinking out of the driveway, like a guilty secret. The silence was strange. You get used to someone's noise even when you hate it. And when it's gone, the absence feels louder than their words ever did. But the neighborhood didn't mourn her silence. They thrived in it. Families spent more time outside. Neighbors shared lemonade and lawn chairs again. The tension that had once weighed heavy on Cottonwood Street began to lift like a storm cloud, finally passing. And Karen. She stayed locked away, living in the very prison she had built herself. Chapter 12. Letters and Lawsuits. 2 weeks after the city fine, her Karen filed lawsuits against 4 different people. Me for defamation, the city for maladministration, Mrs. Peterson for slander, and unbelievably, the HOA itself for failing to protect her civil liberties. Mom. None of it stuck. Judges dismissed her cases faster than you could blink. One ruling actually included the phrase, "The court refuses to entertain weaponized victimhood." The rejections hit her harder than the fines. Karen had built her life around the idea that if you pushed hard enough, yelled loud enough, demanded loudly enough, you would win. Now every door she banged on stayed firmly shut, and the ones she'd slammed on others stayed that way too. Chapter 13. A Fragile Visit. One Saturday evening, I heard a knock at my door. Not loud, not demanding. Almost hesitant, I opened it to find Karen standing there. No sunglasses, no designer outfit, just jeans, a worn t-shirt, and hollow eyes that looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. In her hands, she held a small, battered book, The Beginner's Guide to Native Gardening. She started, then swallowed hard. I didn't know what it was, what it meant. I just thought it was ugly, and I didn't want it here. Her voice cracked on the last word. She looked up, blinking fast. I was wrong. For a long moment, I just stared at her. I could see it, the walls she'd built her whole life cracking, crumbling, leaving her exposed. Human, not a villain in a meme. Just a deeply broken person who didn't know how to belong without dominating. Finally, I stepped back and held the door open wider. You want to come sit for a while? I asked. She nodded. And for the first time since she moved on to Cottonwood Street, Karen walked into a neighbor's home without an agenda. Chapter 14. Conversations over tea. We sat on the porch, 2 battered chairs creaking under the evening breeze. I poured us both tea, sweet and strong, like my grandma used to make. At first we talked about nothing, the weather, the city's new bike lanes, the way the evening light turned the neighborhood golden. Slowly the conversation deepened. Karen told me about her childhood. A father who demanded perfection. A mother who measured love in appearances. A life lived chasing approval she never quite earned. I thought if everything looked right, she said softly, then everything would be right. She looked out at the reborn lawn, the butterflies dancing over the milkweed. But I was wrong. Beauty isn't control, it's care. I didn't offer easy forgiveness, didn't pat her hand and say it was okay, because it wasn't. But sitting there listening, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about erasing hurt. It's about refusing to let it define the future. Chapter 15. Planting New Seeds. A month later, something remarkable happened. Karen, on her own without prompting, volunteered to help at the community garden. She showed up early, pulled weeds without complaining, carried heavy bags of mulch, dirt smudging her jeans. At first, people were skeptical. Wary, but actions speak louder than apologies, and over time, a cautious trust grew. One Saturday, I watched her kneeling in the dirt, patiently planting a row of native sunflowers with Gus and Vanessa's kids. Laughing, smiling, not the tight, strained smirk of before, but something real, something open. The garden blossomed that summer, so did we. And the patch of green on Cottonwood Street that Karen once tried to poison, it thrived because kindness like roots grow strongest in broken ground. Part 4. Chapter 16. Seasons of Change. Summer slipped into fall. The leaves along Cottonwood Street burned brilliant gold and crimson, swirling through the crisp air. Life moved on. But it wasn't the same as before. The street was different, warmer, more connected. The lines between neighbors blurred into something softer. Karen didn't vanish again. She stayed. She helped organize the fall harvest at the community garden. She sat quietly at HOA meetings, listening instead of dominating. She even started tending a tiny patch of native flowers in her own yard. It wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but it was real, and somehow that made it beautiful. Chapter 17. A Ceremony of Roots. The city held a small ceremony to recognize the success of the Green Renewal Project. They invited all 20 pilot homeowners, the mayor, the environmental committee, and even local media. It wasn't a huge event, just a few folding chairs, a table of lemonade and cookies, but it felt monumental. When my name was called, I stood up with a lump in my throat. They handed me a framed certificate in recognition of your stewardship for protecting the future. One root at a time. The crowd clapped. Kids cheered. I caught sight of Karen standing near the back, clapping too quiet and small and earnest. Our eyes met. She mouthed, "Thank you." For the first time, I believe she meant it. Chapter 18. Forgiveness in full bloom. One chilly morning, I found a package on my porch. Inside was a small potted plant, a native dogwood sapling, my favorite, with a handwritten note. For planting, for forgiving, for growing, Karen. I stood there a long time, cradling that tiny tree in my hands. Forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger. It's about planting something new in the empty space it leaves behind. That afternoon, I dug a hole near the center of the lawn, where the worst of the poison damage had been, and placed the dogwood there. Roots deep, branches stretching toward the sky. Karen watched from across the street. She didn't wave, didn't intrude. She just watched and smiled, a real smile. Chapter 19. A Street Reborn. As winter approached, the community garden entered its resting phase. But the spirit of the place didn't fade. People still gathered, sharing stories, shoveling mulch, planting spring plantings over steaming mugs of cider. Cottonwood Street became something rare, a place where people weren't just neighbors, a place where they were caretakers of the land and of each other. And Karen, she didn't become perfect. She still had sharp edges, still sometimes said the wrong thing, but she also learned to say, "I'm sorry," and mean it, and that made all the difference. Chapter 20. The last bloom. One crisp morning, early spring. I sat on my porch watching the first new blooms open. The dogwood's tiny white flowers trembled in the breeze. The milkweed pushed stubbornly through thawing soil. The clover spread like a living carpet under the rising sun. A group of children ran laughing through the yard, weaving between the flowers. And standing off to the side, smiling shyly, was Karen, helping Gus repaint the little wooden garden signs. Grow kindness, respect roots, patience grows. Everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool, clean air. We had survived. We had grown, not because we never broke, not because we were perfect, but because we chose again and again to plant hope in broken ground. When I opened my eyes, the street before me wasn't just Cottonwood anymore. It was home, real, imperfect, and utterly beautiful. The end.